Alright guys, welcome back. So in this video, I want to look at our obstacles once again. Now we talked about them very early on, and we also coded the logic for it. So let's try and put them in. Now I seem to have accidentally removed the obstacle from my hierarchy. You might still have it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop a new car onto our screen somewhere. Now to position it, let me just bring it here next to the car, and initially let me just bring it right on top of the car so I can try and position it. Paste component values, and so here we have it. So if you still have your car, you can just use that one, or you can get a new one. So before I do anything else, I want to change this back to what we had in the script. So I'm going to go over here like so, and in our car movement script. Okay, so obviously ignore all the commented out code. We don't care about that. So we were using the name obstacle here, and I'm going to go ahead and call my car just that. I believe we also had a box collider on our car, if I'm right. So I'm going to go ahead and put a box collider on here, and let me just adjust it real quickly. So like so, and like so, and we'll have to tweak these colliders a little bit later on, but I think they're fine for now. Just kind of doing them a little bit quickly right now so I can get on with the lecture. Yeah, so I think this is fine. Just so I don't lose it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it over here on my prefabs folder after I've renamed it to obstacle. Alright, so okay. So I've got it as a prefab now. Okay, so now we want to start setting up our obstacles, okay? So here's the logic. What we're going to do is we're going to make these obstacles part of our environment, okay? And we're going to have a couple of different obstacle patterns, and we'll make them part of our environment, and using the code, we will be turning them on and off randomly, okay? So you're probably a little bit confused, but let me just show you what I mean by that, okay? So let's go over to our first obstacle. And as you can see, it's directly in front of the car. That's okay. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to duplicate it by Control D a couple of times. Let me just move it down here. Okay, so we have a couple of different obstacles here, like we have this one here, like this one here. So I'm going to, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, just a second, I'm just going to rename them all to obstacle because that's the name that we're using for collision detection. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to position them at, so, -3 and 0 and 3. Okay, now some of you might already know why I use these values, but if you don't remember, let me just hit play and remind you. Okay, so check this out. Our car is at 0. Our car is at, well, whatever the value it is right now. When I hit the right button, it goes 3 units to the right and it goes 3 units to the left. Okay, so this is why I use the values 3 and -3, because look, our car, it starts off at position x equals to 0, and every time we hit right, we're pretty much moving it like so to -3 and like so to 3. If you remember, that's exactly what we talked about, right? So that's where I'm getting those values from. Okay, so now we've got our 3 obstacles. Now, at the moment, I'm just using the same 3 cars, but please feel free to go here in your simple vehicle pack and use a different variety just to make things colorful. Maybe use a police car or something like that. There's a couple of different ones, but at the moment, I'm just going to be using this one. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new empty object, and I'm going to call it obstacles. Not obstacles, obstacles. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 3 cars and I'm going to put them inside here, okay? So now we've got a game object which is pretty much in charge of these three cars like so, okay? And that's going to be one of the patterns, right? Because what we want is we want 3 or 4 different patterns. So in one case, there's going to be 3 cars, 1 car in each lane. Another pattern is going to be just these 2 cars. A third pattern is going to be just these 2 cars. A fourth pattern is going to be no middle car, but these two cars. And the fifth pattern is going to be no cars, right? So we're going to have 5 patterns. One of them is going to have all 3 cars. One of them is going to have no cars. And the other 3 are going to have 2 cars. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate these obstacles 5 times. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Again, I'm going to, just to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and just rename them all to simply obstacles, okay? And like so. Okay, now to start off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck them all, okay? Now, this is our standard 3 obstacles, okay? So I'm going to uncheck this one. Let's go over here. Now, in this one, what I can do is I can uncheck, let's say, the middle one, okay? And this looks like our second obstacle pattern. Okay, so I'm going to disable this one now. Let's look at this one. So in this one, let's also disable one of them, not this one. So this one, okay. And this is a third obstacle pattern. And now we need one where this one is disabled. Okay, so I come over here. Let me have a look at this one and disable this one. Okay. And in the last one, we don't want any cars. Now, actually, we don't even need this one, but again, to keep the explanation simpler and the code that's going to follow a little bit more simpler, I have another one where I disable all 3 cars. Now, and again, the original Crazy Cabby code, I'm not doing it like that. I'm doing it very different, but I'm rewriting the code for this script entirely just to make it a little bit more simpler. Okay, so now we've got our patterns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's have a look and make sure we have all of them. So we've got 3 cars in this one. We've got the 2 cars with the center one missing. We have the 2 cars with the left one missing. We have the 2 cars with the right one missing. And lastly, we have the one with no obstacles. Okay, so we've got our 5 obstacle patterns here. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be, by code, turning one of them on and the rest of them off at a single time. And that's how we're going to be generating our obstacles. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, let's have a look at our environment. Okay, so our environment is like so. I'm going to select all of them and just kind of move them up here. Okay. And you don't really have to move them. I'm just moving them. It doesn't really matter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of them. And I'm going to put them here in my environment. Okay. Now, at the moment, they're all disabled. And I'm going to hit apply here. Okay. Now, by hitting apply here, all of my tiles are going to get these obstacles here. Okay. Now, all of these obstacles are part of our environment prefab. And as you can see, they're all disabled because initially when the game starts, we want to have a clean and straight road. Okay, and after a while, when we start generating the tiles, what we can do is we can, just by enabling or disabling one of these children, okay, so if I enable this one, boom, we have this pattern. Or if I enable this one, then we have a different one. So what we can do is we can later on go and programmatically code which one of these patterns is shown, okay? And the place where we change the position, remember that function where we were changing, which was responsible for changing the position of the tile? That probably seems like a good place to do it, okay? So if you've got the hang of this, if you understand what I'm talking about now, then let's go over and let's have a look at what I'm doing in code, okay? So let's go back to our road manager. Okay, so I'm going to uncomment a couple of these lines here, which I wrote in between videos. So, okay. So first of all, as I've commented here, first of all, let's disable all pre-existing obstacles. Okay, so ignore my spelling. So what I'm saying is, in the very beginning, whenever this function was responsible for updating the environment tiles, right? So it's also going to be responsible for updating the obstacles on those tiles, okay? And as the game progresses forward, these tiles are going to be reused, and every time we position them or we reposition them, then we want to have a different pattern, right? We don't just want to have the same pattern all the time. We don't want these 5 tiles to have a pattern, and for all tiles after that to repeat the same pattern. We want a new pattern every single time so that it creates the illusion that, you know, in fact, we have an endlessly generating road. So over here, what I do is I come over here and I want to disable, just in case if any of these are enabled, right? I want to disable these 5, okay? Now, as I said with arrays, the very first child here is called the 0th child, and this is the first child, and this is the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, okay? So, I come over here and I have a for loop, okay, which runs from 0 to 5, so that means it runs 5 times. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the values of I, and what I do is I go in here in my environment tiles array, okay, which was over here, which contains our pool, okay, over here, okay, and I find the next tile to move, which we're going to just move, right? In the last video, we talked about how we're going to move them and reposition them. So before moving them and reposition them, I find that tile which I'm going to move, and by doing .transform.getChild, okay, by doing .transform.getChild, I can find the child at a particular index, okay, and I can go ahead and now put in over here I. So the first time it comes in, it goes to the 0th child, then the 1st, then the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and so on and so forth. And we can access this game object. So these are game objects which are a child of this environment game object. So I find the tile which I'm going to move. I find the ith child. So in this case, 0, 1, 2, 3, whichever one, depending on this for loop. I find the game object and I do set active to false, right? So just in case if any of these were left on from previously moving the tiles, I turn them all off, okay? I turn them all off. Next, we go on with our logic that we talked about in the last video, right? We reposition it and we reposition it and we put it in the new place. And now what we want to do is, now that we have placed the tile all the way at the front of the row, we want to enable one of the patterns, right? One of the obstacle patterns right here. So I'm going to comment this out. And once again, I have a comment here which says enable one of the 5 patterns. So what I do is I define a new variable called enable obstacle pattern, and I do random.range 0 to 5. Now this line of code here, random.range, it gives you a random number between 0 and 4, okay? So it doesn't return 5, it just returns 0 and 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? Let me comment this out, okay? So it gives me a number, one of these numbers, okay? And notice how there's 5 of them corresponding to each one of our patterns, okay? Now notice, this is the 0th pattern, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Now all I need to do is, depending on what the value of this variable is, I can simply enable that pattern. So I can do environment tiles, next tile to move, so I can find the tile which I just repositioned over here, okay? So this one was for repositioning. I can even add a comment here, so reposition. And over here, before we make our updates to our index and position, I need to enable the pattern. So I can do environment tiles, next tile to move, index. This is the tile we just moved. Then we can do .transform.getChild, okay? And what I'm doing is I'm passing in this variable here, and I'm getting the child object of whichever tile I'm about to move, and I'm going to set one of these as .enabled true, or rather not that. I mean, where is it? Okay. So yeah, so over here I'm going to set it as set active as true, okay? So I hope that makes sense. I'm finding the tile we just moved, and I'm going to enable one of the first 5 obstacle patterns, and I'm going to set it to true. And then after that, I can pretty much update the index and the position. So I hope that makes sense. And if I run the game now, what we can do is we can, hopefully, if everything runs okay, then we should have a situation where everything seems to be working. Okay, so it seems like we are getting some sort of patterns, and our jumping is again off, but we'll look at that in a later video very soon. And yeah, everything seems to be working fine. Now, of course, if I hit one of these cars, what's going to happen is, let's see. Yeah, okay, so the game ends because we were setting game over to false. one thing I want to do here while I'm still here is I want to go on my taxi, I want to go on my rigid body, and there are this constraints drop box here. And what I want to do is I want to freeze the rotation in all three directions, and I also want to freeze the, let's leave the position as it is, but I want to freeze the rotation. Now it doesn't really matter, but sometimes when the cars collide, then they'll start rotating, so this should take care of that. And yeah, I think that is all I want to say for this video. Our game is really starting to look good. Now, as you see that the camera is still off in the sense that, oh, it looks too far away, but that is a matter of tweaking, okay? And maybe towards the end of this tutorial, I'll look at tweaking a little bit. Maybe we'll have one video where just making these tweaks. But you're free to do that right now. You're free to find a sweet spot for the camera right now. You notice that the jump is not working like it should be. It's slow. It's it's not fluid. It doesn't look nice. And again, that is part of tweaking. So you're free to have a look at that right now. But what I'm working on right now is I'm just pretty much working on getting all the game mechanics done. Okay, I want to try and do the programming because how fast the car moves, how much its speed increases, how does it jump, how does it feel, how does it look. All of that is usually a designer's job. Now in our case, we're the designer and we're the developers, okay? But usually it's a separate task, so I'm dealing with them separately. I'm not really going into the speed of the car right now or the jump, because look, what could happen is at a later time we might change our code, and then all of that game balancing things that we did would often end up becoming useless. So I don't want that right now. That's why I'm purposely leaving the game like this. I realize that the jump is off, but we will get to that at a later time. So probably in the next video, we'll be looking at, well, we need a restart button for sure. And we also need to enable our pickups. And we also need to do some sort of scoring to keep count of our pickups. So I think we'll look at that in the next video. In the meantime, I hope that this video was helpful. And yeah, I hope you liked it. And if you liked it, feel free to like, subscribe, to follow this sort of content. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much.